There is a hunger in the world that does not gnaw at flesh but at the unseen, the intangible, the very essence of what makes you you. It is an ancient hunger, older than the oldest myths, older than the first fires around which humans whispered stories of shadows that moved against the wind. This hunger belongs to the unseen predators, the energy parasites, the vampires that do not lurk in crypts or castles but in the spaces between words, in the pauses between breaths, in the quiet erosion of your vitality. They are the thieves of light, the siphoners of life force, and they have been feeding on humanity since the dawn of consciousness. To speak of vampires is not merely to invoke the gothic or the grotesque, though those images serve as echoes of a deeper truth. The true vampire does not need fangs. It needs only an opening, a crack in the armor of your awareness, a moment of weariness or distraction. It is the coworker who leaves you drained after every conversation, the relationship that feels like a slow leak in your soul, the cultural machinery that demands your attention, your passion, your time, and gives back only exhaustion. These are the modern masks of an ancient predator. They do not drink blood. They drink you, your energy, your will, your spark. And they do it so subtly that you may never notice until you wake one day and wonder where your fire has gone. This is the forbidden knowledge, that the world is not just a stage for physical survival, but an unseen battlefield of energetic exchange. Every interaction, every bond, every commitment is a transaction of vitality. Most go unnoticed, flowing like an invisible currency beneath the surface of daily life. But some are not exchanges at all. They are thefts. The energy vampire does not trade, it takes. It does not replenish, it depletes. And the most insidious truth of all is that these parasites are not always external. Sometimes they are patterns within us, habits of thought and emotion that feed on our own light like a serpent swallowing its tail. To understand this is to pull back the veil on a hidden layer of reality, one where the wars are fought not with swords but with subtle currents of influence, where the victors are those who can guard their flame against the endless night. It is a knowledge that has been whispered in esoteric traditions, encoded in folklore, glimpsed in the moments when you feel a sudden, unexplained heaviness in the presence of another, or a lightness when a toxic presence finally leaves the room. The vampire myth, in all its variations, is humanity's attempt to name this phenomenon, to give form to the formless drain that so many sense but cannot articulate. But why is this knowledge forbidden? Because to acknowledge it is to admit that not all that appears human is truly aligned with life. Some souls are hollowed out, puppets of a deeper hunger, and to see them for what they are is to risk the terror of realizing how close they walk beside us. It is easier to dismiss such ideas as superstition, to laugh at the notion of energy thieves, than to face the unsettling truth that the greatest predators are the ones we do not recognize until it is too late. Yet there is hope in this unveiling. To know the vampire is to disarm it. To recognize the drain is to learn how to stem the flow. This is not a call to paranoia, but to clarity, to seeing the world as it truly is, in all its luminous and shadowed dimensions. The journey ahead is one of reclamation, of learning to guard your light without closing your heart, of discerning between true connection and silent predation. For in the end, the antidote to the vampire is not a stake or a crucifix, but awareness. The radiant, unshakable awareness that your energy is yours, and no hungry thing has a right to it. To walk through the world unaware of energy parasites is to wander through a moonlit forest without realizing the shadows have teeth. The first and most vital truth to grasp is that life force, call it chi, prana, ka, or simply vitality, is the currency of existence. It animates the body, sharpens the mind, fuels creativity, and sustains the spirit. But like any precious resource, it can be stolen, wasted, or unknowingly surrendered. The vampire, in its many guises, understands this instinctively. It does not hunt out of malice, but out of lack. It is an emptiness that seeks to fill itself with whatever light it can drain from others. The mechanisms of this theft are subtle, almost imperceptible unless you know what to look for. There is the overt predator, the one who leaves you feeling gutted after every encounter, whose presence seems to leach the warmth from the air. But far more common, and far more dangerous, are the unconscious drains. The friend who only ever takes, the social structure that demands endless labor without replenishment, the cultural narratives that equate exhaustion with virtue. These are the systemic vampires, the ones that operate not through individual malice but through collective inertia, feeding on the unexamined assumption that depletion is simply the cost of living. Yet the most insidious energy thieves are not outside us at all. They are the internalized voices, the inherited scripts, the self-sabotaging loops of thought that whisper you are not enough and you must earn your right to exist. These are the psychic vampires we carry within, the ones that feed on our own doubt, our own fear, our own relentless self-criticism. They are the hardest to confront, because to face them is to face the parts of ourselves we'd rather disown, the wounded, hungry shadows we've tried to outrun. At the heart of this dynamic lies a universal law: energy flows where attention goes. The vampire, whether external or internal, thrives on unconscious attention. It cannot feed where there is awareness, where there is boundary, where there is the unshakable knowing that your life force belongs to you. This is why the predator's greatest weapon is not its hunger, but your distraction. Your failure to notice the slow leak, the gradual dimming, the way certain interactions leave you inexplicably weary. The moment you bring this dynamic into the light, it loses its power. But awareness alone is not enough. You must also understand the nature of the exchange. Not all giving is depletion. True connection, true generosity, is a circuit that replenishes both parties. The difference lies in consent and reciprocity. A healthy exchange is like a river flowing between two banks. It nourishes both sides. A vampiric exchange is a one-way siphon, a silent withdrawal that leaves you parched. Learning to discern between the two is the first step in reclaiming your sovereignty. There is also the question of complicity. Many of us, without realizing it, have been trained to offer ourselves up to the drain. We confuse self-sacrifice with virtue, exhaustion with dedication, depletion with love. We have been taught to ignore the quiet voice that says, "This does not feel right," to override the body's wisdom when it whispers, "Step away." To dismantle the vampiric structures in our lives, we must first dismantle the belief that we owe our energy to anyone who demands it. And then there is the most unsettling truth of all. Some people are not just acting as energy vampires, they are energy vampires. They are souls so fractured, so disconnected from their own source, that they can only sustain themselves by feeding on others. They are not evil in the grand theatrical sense. They are simply empty, and emptiness, like nature, abhors a vacuum. To recognize this is not to condemn, but to understand, and to protect yourself accordingly. The work, then, is threefold: to recognize the drain, to reclaim your energy, and to restore the integrity of your boundaries. It is a process of rewiring your attention, of learning to sense the flow of vitality in every interaction, of refusing to tolerate the subtle thefts you once accepted as normal. It is about becoming a guardian of your own light. Legends of vampires and energy thieves exist across cultures not merely as campfire tales, but as profound warnings etched into humanity's collective unconscious. They are shadows cast by a deeper truth, one that cannot be spoken directly, only felt in the shudder that runs down your spine when a stranger's gaze lingers too long, or in the leaden exhaustion after an encounter with someone who talks endlessly but listens never. These stories are maps, disguised as myths, guiding us through the invisible terrain where energy is the only currency that matters. Consider the ancient Mesopotamian tale of the Ekimu, the vengeful spirits of the unburied dead who wandered the earth, sucking the life from the living. They were said to be created by improper rites, by relationships left unresolved, by debts between souls that were never settled. Is this not the perfect allegory for the emotional and energetic debts we carry? The colleague who never reciprocates support, the family member who thrives on drama, the lover who took more than they gave. These are the modern ikimu, the unresolved tensions that continue to feed on us long after the physical interaction has ended. Their power lies in our inability to lay them to rest, to say, enough, no more. Then there is the Slavic upir, a creature that was once human, but, through some fundamental corruption, became a consumer of essence rather than a participant in life. Unlike the aristocratic vampires of later folklore, the upir was often a neighbor, a friend, even a family member, someone you trusted until the day you woke up weakened, your vitality inexplicably diminished. This is the most chilling truth the old stories convey. Energy vampires are not monsters lurking in the dark. They are the people who stand beside us in the light, who smile as they take, who may not even realize what they are doing. The banality of their predation makes it all the more dangerous. Eastern traditions speak of the Vitala, a spirit that attaches itself to the living, whispering doubts and feeding on the resulting fear. Here we see the mirror of our own inner vampires, the anxious thoughts, the corrosive self-criticism, the mental loops that leave us feeling drained without any external cause. The Vitala does not need fangs, it needs only a single thought: you are not enough, repeated until we believe it. And in believing, we offer up our energy like a sacred sacrifice to a god that never gives back. Perhaps the most illuminating myth comes from the Amazonian Shipibo people, who describe certain shamans as Mariah, beings who can project a sort of psychic spiderweb to trap the life force of others. This is vampirism at its most sophisticated, not crude theft, but an entire architecture of entrapment. How many of our modern systems function the same way? Social media platforms designed to addict, workplaces structured to burn out, relationships built on uneven scales of giving. These are the Mariah webs of our time, invisible until you try to pull away and find yourself stuck. But the stories also hold the antidotes. Garlic and mirrors in vampire lore were not mere superstitions. They were symbols of purification and reflection. To repel the energy vampire, you must first cleanse your own energetic field, through boundaries, through conscious breathing, through the refusal to engage in dramas that are not yours. And you must hold up the mirror, forcing the vampire to see itself. This is why narcissists rage when confronted with their own behavior. The mirror is their kryptonite. Light, in these tales, is always the ultimate weapon. Not the passive light of a candle, but the active, searing light of the sun, the unflinching awareness that dissolves all shadows. There's a reason these stories persist. They are not about creatures of the night, but about the night within creatures. They remind us that the true battle is not against external monsters, but against the parts of ourselves and our world that have forgotten how to give, how to connect, how to be nourished without stealing. The vampire is a warning. Beware the hunger that cannot be fed, the thirst that cannot be quenched. And in that warning lies the seed of liberation. The true measure of forbidden knowledge lies not in its mystery, but in its application. The moment cosmic truths descend from the realm of archetypes and settle into the grit of daily life. To recognize energy vampires is one thing. To navigate a world teeming with them is another. This is where philosophy becomes practice, where awareness transforms into armor. The modern predator rarely announces itself with a flourish of capes or gothic allure. It arrives as the charming colleague who somehow always leaves you holding their workload, the romantic partner whose crises perpetually eclipse your needs, or even the cultural mantra that glorifies burnout as a badge of honor. These are the feeding grounds of the 21st century vampire, and your energy is their currency. Consider first the anatomy of an energy drain. There is a particular quality to these encounters, a sensation of being subtly unraveled, as if someone has pulled a loose thread in your psyche. Conversations feel like interrogations disguised as interest. Favors flow one way. You notice yourself minimizing your own light to avoid triggering their envy or neediness. These are the telltale signs, the psychic equivalent of finding unexplained marks on your skin. The first practical step is to cultivate what ancient mystics called discernment. Not judgment, but the ability to distinguish between nourishment and depletion. This begins with the body's wisdom. After interacting with certain people, do you feel expanded or contracted, energized or hollowed out? The flesh knows what the mind often rationalizes away. Boundaries become sacred ground in this work. Not the rigid walls of paranoia, but intelligent membranes that allow generosity while preventing exploitation. A boundary poorly enforced is an open vein. Practice the art of the graceful no, not as rejection, but as self-respect made visible. When the chronic complainer at work corners you for the third time this week, a simple, "I'm not available for this conversation right now," becomes garlic at the door. With the emotional blackmailer who equates your limits with betrayal, silence becomes the mirror that reflects their hunger back at them. These are not manipulations, but protections, the psychic equivalent of wearing silver as you walk through wolf-filled woods. Technology has birthed new hunting grounds for energy parasites. Social media platforms engineered to hook your attention operate on vampiric principles. They exist to harvest your focus and sell it to the highest bidder. The endless scroll is their hypnosis, the outrage algorithm their feeding tube. Here, the countermeasure is ruthless curation. Audit your digital interactions with the same discernment you'd apply to a suspicious stranger at your door. Does this account expand or diminish you? Does this app leave you feeling connected or cannibalized? The modern mystic must become a digital alchemist, transforming mindless consumption into conscious choice. Financial systems, too, can function as macro-scale energy siphons. The grinding machinery of late-stage capitalism thrives on stolen vitality, underpaying labor while overcharging for temporary relief from the exhaustion it creates. This is vampirism institutionalized, a perpetual motion machine of drained life force. While no individual can dismantle such systems overnight, we can starve the beast where we stand. Supporting ethical businesses, reclaiming leisure as resistance, and rejecting the lie that your worth equals your productivity, these acts become revolutionary in a world built on energetic extraction. The workplace presents particularly fertile territory for energy predation. The boss who mistakes your dedication for an all-access pass to your psyche, the coworker who weaponizes incompetence to offload their responsibilities, these are the corporate undead. Counter them with what the Kabbalists called Tzimtzum, the divine art of contraction. Just as God was said to withdraw slightly to make space for creation, you too must strategically withhold your full radiance. Become a master of the polite deflection, the artful delegation, the unshakable, "I'll get to that during work hours." Your brilliance is not a public utility. Most challenging are the familial and romantic bonds that have turned parasitic. The mother who drinks your confidence with every backhanded compliment, the partner whose learned helplessness makes you their perpetual caretaker. These relationships require the delicate surgery of resetting expectations. Sometimes this looks like trained non-reactivity to guilt trips. Other times, it demands the nuclear option of distance. The key lies in recognizing that love does not mean unlimited withdrawal rights on your soul. The ultimate protection, however, is not defense but vitality, so robust it becomes inoculation. Regular practices of energy hygiene, grounding in nature, conscious breathing, creative expression, fill your cup to overflowing, making petty drains insignificant. Like a city with abundant fresh water, you stop obsessing over every leak. This is the great paradox. The more you nurture your own flame, the less attractive you become to shadows. They prefer easier prey. The knowledge of energy vampires is not meant to breed fear, but to cultivate a deeper kind of courage. The courage to see clearly, to stand firmly, and to remain radiant in a world that often rewards dimming your light. These predators, whether human or systemic, personal or archetypal, have thrived in the shadows of our awareness for too long. But shadows dissolve under the steady gaze of the sun, and what is awareness if not inner sunlight? You hold the power not only to recognize these drains, but to transform your relationship with them entirely. This is the alchemical secret at the heart of all forbidden knowledge, that the monster, when faced fully, becomes the mentor. Every encounter with an energy vampire is an invitation to fortify your boundaries, clarify your yes and no, and reclaim sovereignty over your most precious resource, your vital essence. Consider the metamorphosis that awaits when you shift from victim to guardian of your own energy. The chronic complainer who once drained you becomes a bell reminding you to protect your peace. The toxic workplace that siphoned your creativity becomes the catalyst for building something of your own. Even the inner vampires, the self-doubt, the perfectionism, the inherited narratives of unworthiness, become teachers showing you where your light still needs tending. This is how we turn predation into initiation. The vampire mythos across cultures always contains this dual truth. The creature is both a warning and a test. Will you surrender your life force, or will you rise to claim it with both hands? The transformational call here is not to wage war against energy drains, but to become so vibrantly alive that they lose all power over you. A forest doesn't fight the shadows beneath its trees. It grows so tall that its leaves inevitably find the sun. Your energy is meant to flow, to create, to connect, not to be hoarded in paranoid isolation. The ultimate protection is not walls, but discernment combined with unshakable self-worth. When you know your value beyond doubt, you stop permitting withdrawals from those who offer no deposits. You begin to recognize that sometimes the most spiritual thing you can say is a grounded, gracious no that leaves no room for negotiation. Imagine a life where your energy is yours to direct like a master conductor, toward passions that ignite you, people who reflect your light back multiplied, and purposes that make your soul hum. This is not fantasy, but your birthright waiting to be reclaimed. Every time you choose not to engage in gossip that leaves a bitter aftertaste, every time you walk away from a conversation that feels like emotional panhandling, every time you silence your inner critic with deliberate self-blessing, you are taking back territory the vampires once claimed. The journey from depletion to sovereignty begins with simple but profound questions. Where in my life does interaction feel like extraction? What relationships or habits leave me feeling lighter versus heavier? When did I last feel truly, vibrantly alive, and what has been sucking that feeling away? These inquiries are lanterns in the dark, revealing the feeding trails energy vampires leave behind. The answers may unsettle at first, but remember, awareness is the first act of reclamation. Now comes the sacred rebellion, living as proof that one can walk through this world intact, unbitten, with your fire not only guarded, but generously shared on your own terms. This is how we change the paradigm, not by fighting the darkness, but by becoming so luminous that the darkness must recede. There's an old esoteric saying that vampires cannot cross running water. Your energy, when flowing freely toward your authentic joys and purposes, becomes that rushing stream. No parasite can take root in such vitality. The final truth is this: you were never meant to be prey. The very fact that you followed this knowledge to its conclusion proves there's something in you that vampires cannot touch, an inner sun that no shadow can fully eclipse. Now comes the daily practice of living from that inextinguishable light. Start small, but start today. Protect one conversation. Reclaim 1 hour previously lost to energy drains. Bless yourself with one act of uncompromising self-care. The revolution begins in these quiet moments of choosing yourself.